Hi, everyone. This is Joni McGarry, and today I am thrilled to have with me my very good friend Josh Stylman, who will probably make me laugh 100 times during this podcast. I invited Josh on the show because he is doing a great deal of research and terrific writing about the nature of our reality under the veneer of what we think to be true. And he is always pushing back against my Pollyanna-ish notion about reality, and I really appreciate that. So, welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you for having
And, and would you tell us a little bit more about yourself? What you'd like us to know?
me. I was born a poor black man. Sorry, that's the jerk. Um,
I know that reference.
I talk to a lot of young people, and they don't know what I'm talking about when I say it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a citizen, husband, father, based in the Hudson Valley in New York. Transplanted from New York City, where I lived for the 25 years prior, before the city lost its mind. And
Hmm.
I hope it finds it again because it was at one time a wonderful city and should.
Hmm.
But I'm a longtime tech entrepreneur. Started a brewery about a decade ago, which was kind of a midlife crisis project that was going swimmingly well until COVID. And for all the reasons that small businesses struggled in COVID, and then subsequently had a weird incident where I spoke against vaccine mandates, and that didn't go over very well in my community. So I've taken a bit of a backseat from that project, but I'm still loosely involved. And I guess in my spare time, I've become a raging conspiracy theorist, reading all sorts of historical texts and modern things and trying to interpret our reality and convincing friends of mine that are normies and earnest like yourself that the world isn't what we think it is.
Well, I'd like to think I'm more normie adjacent than totally normie.
If you're friends with me and some of the other company we keep, certainly
Yes.
you're not really a normie.
Well, what I find really compelling about you is the writing. Well, many things. You have a great sense of humor, and we've become good friends. And you have a fabulous wife, and she's terrific. And I don't know what she's doing with you. But
Yeah,
anyway, you do really great research and writing on Substack, and you've really been focused for quite a while now on trying to uncover how we are propagandized, how we are manipulated, how we are mind controlled, and and you document all that in your writing. And so it's not conspiracy theory. You're doing research and you're bringing the facts and you're trying to put it into a context that people can understand and start to wake up to the sea they're swimming in. Can you tell us a little bit more about your series on mind control and then how that forms the foundation to really everything that you look at in the current day news cycle, if you will?
sure. And I'm half joking about the conspiracy theorist thing. It's like everything else. It's weaponized language,
Sure.
which is incredibly reductive. Um, in fact, just a quick side thing. One of my children recently said, "Dad, did you think this is how you'd wind up?" And I thought he meant like yeah, like married to your mom or with kids or living where we live. He's like, no, like
Responsible, successful, well
whatever,
liked.
whatever adjectives. I wouldn't describe myself that way, but whatever adjectives. And he was like, no, like as a conspiracy theorist.
Wow.
And I got in his face immediately about how reductive that is, and challenging him as to whether or not people in power conspire, and is it our role as citizens not to theorize about how that might happen to oppress the masses. But um, as you may know, I thought I was awake. Pre COVID, I have at least one dear friend in my inner circle who was like the original red pill in my life, who woke up after 9/11
Hmm.
screaming from the rooftops, and he definitely convinced our friend group that things were not as it appeared, and on some level. Um, if he were here, he'd take strong exception to how far we went, and he'd be right. Because we like in my house, we had like no Monsanto rules. We knew corporations run the world; they were corrupt, the wars were bullshit, all that kind of stuff.
So that was how you felt like you were awake.
I thought I was awake. The two
Hmm.
party system was ridiculous. Like certain things were quite obvious or had become quite obvious over the years. So I didn't have total, virgin ears, but COVID was the big wake up call, certainly for me. And I guess, I'm sort of backing into your question about the mind control thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's through immediately, I was stupid enough to, I got the J&J jab and rationalized it with, I did zero research, rationalized it with like, how bad could it be? I put so much crap in my body through the years and literally wasn't paying attention because I was busy trying to hold my business and my family together with duct tape, like a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people. I knew there was a culture war happening, and as someone who is supportive of civil liberties, I didn't think the lockdowns made sense, but I thought they were just stupid. I was a little lost, candidly, and it took me a minute to get my bearings.
So you thought they were stupid because you thought the people in charge were just mistaken
Yeah,
at the
I
time.
thought it was like, they were doing the precautionary principle and they went too far, and it felt un-American, but I also, and at least initially, certainly March 2020, like I closed my business because I thought it was my my responsibility
Sure.
as a member of society, because there was a virus that was going to ravage the world and people were going to drop dead. And
Well, we were seeing videos of people falling over in China. I mean,
yeah,
I have to admit, I locked down really earnestly, to use that word,
yeah,
for the first part of the lockdowns. What woke me up was the minute I heard vaccine. I don't know why, but
yep,
then I thought, oh, they're not mistaken about
yeah,
anything. This
I,
is we're on that train. We're getting there. That's the station we're going to.
I wasn't even paying attention to it. I don't watch the news. I was working like 20 hours a day trying to save my company, and then
Yeah.
homeschooling my kids and realizing the education system had failed them in that process. So
Right.
there were certainly some eye-opening things. I had this night with my buddy. I won't get into the whole thing, but like, first words he said to me were like, "Greatest crime in the history of humanity," right?
Oh,
I'm like,
about the lockdowns?
about the whole thing.
Uh huh.
And I had never heard of Kerry Mullis. Didn't ask any questions about PCR, and we were like a year into this already. And
Wait, for people who might not know, who's Carrie Mullis?
he was the inventor of the PCR test,
Mm-hmm.
who sadly died in, I believe it was August 2019, and famously said that PCR was not and should not be used as a diagnostic
Right,
tool. It could
right.
effectively make it say anything. So things like that, kind of the root, and I think this is important in the direct answer to your question about mind control. The root of much of the COVID story starts with PCR.
Mm-hmm.
If you recall,
Mm-hmm.
you may be diseased and not know it. One of the symptoms is not having symptoms,
Right.
which in retrospect is ridiculous. You need a test to tell you you're sick when you
But
feel
it was
fine.
so new that
It was
everyone bought
so-
it,
That's right. And,
or they sold it to us as so new.
that's right. I think, like all these things, they prey on the best of us, which is empathy, right? You don't want to get grandma sick.
Mm-hmm.
And they in the process also, or they weaponize, I should say, the empathy while preying on the worst of us, which is our fear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, you might die, you might kill your family, all these sorts of things. So, in any event, I was probably as clueless as the next person for a while. A buddy of mine quickly took me from zero to genocide, and I didn't know anything about.
Oh, you just muted. You're muted. There you
Better?
go. Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. I've
No,
no
say,
we're moving the mic.
okay. You said you didn't know anything
mRNA or
about what? I'm sorry.
mRNA,
mRNA.
mRNA
Okay.
technology. When my buddy, I was starting, when he said, what happens when they tell you have to vaccinate your children?
Hmm.
And I said, why would they tell me that? My kids are at no risk from this disease.
Right.
And, I quickly got a Joshua. You don't understand what's going on here. And by the way, my mother is the only other person that calls me Joshua.
Okay.
This particular friend, when he's getting in my,
Exasperated at you.
usually rightfully, I wagged my finger in his face and said, "What are you talking about, dude? This is the United States of America," which I've subsequently apologized for. And we stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning arguing about this sort of thing. I talked to my wife in the morning, and she's like, "How was your night with so and so?" I was like, "It was great. Either I need to call his mother and he needs to be committed, or humanity's under attack and it's time to wake up." Then I knew it was the latter. So we started a little study group. Some of my oldest friends, and I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
friends from elementary school. Then none of us were even really friends anymore. We were just never able to make new friends. So we're still.
Well, I can understand why that might be.
I think you've met most of them.
I have.
And a few others, like a brilliant doctor, interestingly, a climate scientist. Like there was an interesting study group that got together, and it started as a bunch of concerned parents kind of exploring mRNA technology, and started pulling back the layers from the thing. And it took us through all sorts of history we never learned, technologies we never heard about, and mind control. That was a really long-winded way to get here, by the way. But mind control was a recurring theme through all of it. And it became evident to me that mind control, like, I'm an old software guy. In tech terms, you'd say the bottom of the stack, right? Everything you build on is like considered the tech stack.
Okay.
Nothing works in terms of any of what we see on the news, anything people believe, unless there's some form of mind control.
Okay, and the whole term mind control is actually, I think it's a very accurate term, but many people would just say mind control, oh, that's crazy. Just the actual term itself. And I would say like propaganda might be a way to bring people in a little bit more, but it's more than that. It really is getting into your brain and controlling the way you think. I mean, I don't think about it as a term that's off-putting, but a lot of people would be like, mind control. What are you, crazy?
Well, yes, I am crazy.
Yes.
So I've been told. But I think there's a fine line. And you asked about the piece. So I started with my friends collecting these notes. And we probably have enough notes for like 20,000 pages of books on various topics. Mind control was one of the biggest themes, and ranging from like there's a spectrum of, as a young man I was super interested in propaganda and interested in Bernays, and I really just thought it was more about selling products to people, not
right.
a larger social engineering experiment.
It's just advertising and marketing.
Advertising, sell, buy this soap, it'll make you taller, kind of thing. As I started exploring, and I knew a little bit about MK Ultra. I knew the government did a mind control program that came out in the 1970s in the Church Committee. I didn't know that it was like 90% redacted, and it was probably a limited hangout. So they were really just telling you, we used to do this thing, but we're not anymore.
Right.
Which
just means like we aren't going to do it in a way that has the light of day shining on it.
That's right. What I believe happened, and I lay this out in about 40 or 50,000 words, which, by the way, I had a wonderful editor on that, as I have on a few of these big pieces. So thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
Lady Spalding, which I believe is your editor name. But I believe the MK Ultra program, which was originally, mind control broadly is an ancient technique, and going back, centuries, perhaps even millennia. And it was codified by the Nazis in terms of the modern era, or sort of modern era, like 80, 90 years ago. And it came over with Operation Paperclip in the 1940s, post-World War II.
And for somebody who might not know, what is Operation Paperclip?
So the quick version is Nuremberg Code happened. The Cold War was starting. United States government said, you know what, we need to fight Russia now. Some of these Nazi doctors and scientists probably aren't bad people. Let's get them on our side, and let's get them in really important positions. And born out of that were things like NASA, which was led by a guy named Werner von Braun, who was one of the top Nazi scientists.
So they literally brought Nazi scientists and leaders and brains over and incorporated them into our national security and national science apparatus.
NASA, NATO, Department of Defense, CIA. So yeah, nothing terribly important. But one of the big ones was Operation Paper, or was the MK Ultra program, which was born, I guess, institutionally inside the CIA. And I forget the exact years, but it was 1950s, and it's very well documented. What I believe happened was that they shattered it into a lot of smaller programs that happened in a more clandestine manner, and certainly still happen today with far more sophisticated techniques.
And they moved it from like a central operation to it was far flung across universities and prestigious hospitals where this work was being funded and done under the cover of research.
That's right. I put in the series, so it's a 4-part series that I told through an allegorical lens. I've wanted to write this for a while because I think it's been critically important in my journey, and I wanted to sort of. I spent, I don't know, 10,000 hours or whatever you spend on to learn a thing, or putting these notes together. And I wanted to just give a head start for anyone else that might be interested in this topic. And the idea was open source it. Hopefully people will do something else with it and build on it or critique it if they think, which I'm totally open to.
And I'm going to put the link to that series into your Substack in the show notes.
Thank you
as well.
So I guess I was trying to think about the best way to tell it, and I couldn't think of a way that made it really educational, but also interesting, and that didn't make me sound like a complete lunatic. So I came up with this allegorical lens where I came up through 4 chapters. And, the first one was the laboratory, which really talks about the period we were just talking about from like Nazis to inception in the United States. The second was the theater.
And the first part is the research and the techniques are tried on individual people in closed, secret settings. Many times the subjects were unwitting. They thought they were checking into a facility like McLean for depression, and then nefarious stuff was being done to them. So it wasn't a broad scale program, and it was done on individuals in one-off settings, right?
That's exactly
for the most part.
For the most part, not
So,
I don't
like
know,
laboratory work.
Like laboratory work. That's why I called it the laboratory. And I guess part of and you mentioned McLean, which is McLean Hospital in Massachusetts, which was which sort of segues into the second part, which I call the theater, because one of the things that has become evident to me, and this is my own interpretation, right? Just through I use for the whole series and through a lot of my writing, I use our mutual friend Mark Schiffer put together something called he wrote a manifesto about pattern recognition. And it's really worthwhile. And Mark is the smartest person I'll ever know.
Same for me.
I mean, it's ridiculous, but
I don't dare. I'm not even going to invite him on because I mean, you're the second smartest person I know, but
no, we are very different. I think I'm a good observer of people and things, but he is like, Good Will Hunting type brain.
Yeah.
Who may have been MK Ultra as a child, but that's a longer conversation. Through looking at some of the institutions involved, places like McLean, which you mentioned, just staying on that example, really interesting because I started looking into just a lot of celebrities wound up there, and I noticed patterns through their work that they often came out with different work or different themes in their work around things that map to MK Ultra. So like, fragmented imagery, and like James Taylor was one. There's a whole bunch of these. Sylvia Plath, John Nash, Frederick Law Olmsted, and there's a list that goes on and on and on. David Foster Wallace, and there was a theme where they go in for one thing and they come out and their work seems really different. So, kind of using that as a model, I talk about the theater, which I believe is like the creation of celebrity and perhaps mind-controlled celebrities. I talk a lot about the Grateful Dead, a band that I've been a fan of for 35 years. The lead songwriter from the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia's songwriter, is a guy named Robert Hunter. He signed up, and it's public knowledge that he signed up for the MK Ultra program because it was free LSD. So, which was enough. So you had mentioned people were unwittingly participating in this.
Right.
There's another example where people put their hand up and they were up for it, and it was mostly young people who maybe didn't know what they were signing up for. So I go through this whole thing in the theater, and it's sort of the birth of modern celebrity, which we now take for granted in 2025. But going back our parents' generation, celebrity is a really unnatural thing. But again, I talk a bit about that, and then I segue into what I call the network, where I did a funny thing. I wanted to do something fresh, even in like conspiracy circles. Not enough people ever talk about O.J. Simpson. So I use that as a jumping off point, because in my lifetime, that's the first thing I remember that we were all kind of participating in. Like in
Right.
terms of, it was the showpiece. We all watched along with the O.J. Simpson, first the chase, and then it was
Oh,
my
we were
like
riveted.
we were riveted. And retrospectively, I realized that, well, it's also the birth of like a new form of reality TV, and
Mm-hmm.
it was like a new style of talk show with the Ricky Lakes and
Mm-hmm.
Maury Poviches, where regular people become the spectacle in
Mm-hmm.
itself.
And
And
they also engender incredibly charged emotion and opinions and projection of your personal stuff onto someone you've never met that you don't really know the story about, and it causes you to hate other people and to fight with other people that you may know in real life, which is the pattern that we see over and over and over again. And that was that particular instance, and you talk about it in the piece, is it fomented a huge racial divide. I mean, it really.
well,
And I think they teed it up and served it up so that people would see it through very, very different eyes and then respond very differently. And then it reinforces the idea that we are other than you. You are other than us. Which is an incredibly powerful tool that they continue to use over and over again, whether it's skin color, whether it's vaccine status, whether it's somebody who's concerned about the Palestine situation or is a Zionist. I mean, it's over and over and over. And anyway, I'm getting a little off track here, but the power of celebrity or people we project our stuff onto to lead us in those directions, I don't think that was always the case, as you said. That's just something that we completely take for granted now. We look to outsource all of our emotions to what is this person doing? What is this person saying? And we don't know these people.
did you just say something anti-Semitic?
No, I'm sure I didn't.
Sorry, I know this is a new podcast. I just want to set you
Well,
up.
it might be an old podcast now. I mean, it might be like, well, that thing never got off the
No,
ground.
I'm making a joke because that's kind of the point, right? So it's
Right.
rule by division. Make sure that the two sides hate each other and don't realize that both tracks of the dialectic roll up to the same org chart, and the hatred is the feature, and the people that are around, I believe, creating it through social engineering are looting the joint in the process and stripping liberty. So, which I guess leads to part 4. And by the way, in the network, part 3, I talk about that through, from OJ through present day, because it's become very obvious, right? Through all the things you mentioned, gender ideology, whatever, right? Insert, controversial issue here. And most likely the takeaway is, I'm the Yankees, you're the Red Sox. We have to hate each other. And it's not just about this particular issue anymore. I now must hate everything you stand for. And then I need my media to tell me what I'm supposed to believe on every individual issue. And this is like the root of everything I'm kind of interested in right now, because without it, you can't break free, which leads to, just to close the loop to the question, part 4, I talk about what I call the mirror. And through each of these parts of the allegory, I use some pop culture reference.
Wait, you skipped the network. So, because
that was the OJ stuff. It's, it's us it's us as participants.
Okay.
Which I do believe is a form of mind control on some level, whether it's like, it's different than the laboratory because it's not one-to-one anymore. It's whatever this force is to many. And, there's a line. I've been exploring this stuff really deeply, and I'm still not quite sure where propaganda ends and mind control begins. I think it's really subtle and the lines are blurred. But again, it's 50,000 words. I won't bore you with like all the detail of it, particularly because you read it and edited it. But I won't bore your audience with it. If they're interested, I encourage them to read the piece and show feedback of where they think I got it wrong.
Well, I think the interesting part about when you go from the laboratory to the theater, where we are observing people act out these things in real time, when we cross over into the network, it's because we're in the OJ situation, we were plugged in via ubiquitous media, but now we're really plugged in through our personal algorithms. So we're really in the game now as participants without realizing that we are. So anyway,
that's exactly right. In fact, I have a section in there called "The Algorithm is the New Handler," and in the old days, I do believe there were professional handlers for, say, Marilyn Monroe, which is one of the
Sure.
case studies I explore. I think the modern day, our handler is our Instagram algorithm or our Google algorithm or YouTube or MSNBC or Fox or whatever
Mm-hmm.
our media flavor is. But despite all this, I get into part 4, which I call the mirror, which I tell through the lens of the Truman Show, which, I think one of my favorite movies and always resonated deeply with me on some level. And I'm starting to understand why in a different way than maybe I did when I first saw it. But it's really about that moment of awakening and what do you do about it? Right. And I think for me, the first point is just become a little more discerning and realize that there are forces that are trying to manipulate us about everything and out every step. And, it's sort of this thing where not only do they tell you, they being the media, let's call it broadly.
But the media is not the decision maker. The media is the mouthpiece of whoever is, and it might not be a monolithic force. And that's a topic that's, we can talk about forever, but the media is the mouthpiece for it.
But they don't even tell you just what to think. They tell you what your possibilities of thought are. And I think that's the most disturbing part. And most of these, I believe, are just false binaries. Right? Like, you're with us, you're against us on every single one of these issues, regardless of what side you're on. And I'm sorry, but fuck that. I won't hate my friends and neighbors because they maybe have a different media diet than I do, or maybe have a different upbringing than I do. And I think reasonable people can talk about the means and methods by which you solve hard problems, spewing hatred and ad hominems.
But you have to be able to. What'd you say?
This is why I have no friends and I talk to the trees.
I think reasonable people can do that, but in order to get to that point of being a reasonable person, you have to wake yourself up a little bit. So you have to realize that what you think you believe is maybe not necessarily an organic thought process that you've gone through. I have very good friends who went to the No Kings protest. And then I have other friends who are like MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. And it's two sides of the same coin. And they have the same passion and the same vitriol, all centered around this avatar, this person they've never met, they never will meet, who doesn't care about either of them. But yet they can't talk to each other because both sides will say the exact same things about the other side, but they think they're right. And so until those individuals say, they wake up, those conversations are very difficult. They're very difficult. And I think that's part of the important thing of what you're trying to do, if I can paraphrase your meaning in life. You're trying to wake people up. And open their eyes to the sea they're swimming in.
I don't know what role I play, if any, in all of this yet. I think at this point, I'm just an old guy yelling at my TV in my own way, which I think is a little more measured and thoughtful. I don't know. I think for me, it was kind of harrowing to wake up, realize I'm a middle-aged man who doesn't know anything. I just know what I was told. And I believe with conviction, and by the way, I bought plenty of these PSYOPs, and some of them I'm horrified by now. Not that long ago, by the way. So I wrote about this, and I called it the horror liberation cycle. Which is like, my jaw was open for years. Like probably from around the time we met, which I think was like 3 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Although it feels like 25 now.
It does. Well, it feels like 100 to me.
Yeah. But, well, sorry, you got the short end of that. But at some point, if you can get over it and accept that, yes, you've been lied to.
About everything important,
everything.
Or if you haven't been, it's which one haven't you been lied to about? Like, how would you even know? That's the problem. It's so disorienting.
But at some point, if you can get over that hump,
right,
it's completely liberating, because I feel like a little kid again. I'm like, well, that's fascinating, and that's fascinating. And then it's like, well, the two questions I always ask are like, well, why would they lie about it? And the answer must be really significant if they're going to such great lengths. And what else would they lie about? And on the second question, the answer turned out to be just about everything.
Right.
And on the first one, it's like, well, I don't think these are small lies, because you're
Mm-mm.
building, propping up institutions and textbooks and curriculum all around these lies. So therefore, it must be really big. And I think maybe I'm just a failed pessimist, but I think the other side of this might be glorious. Maybe they, if they're keeping, and you have to assume, I've wrestled with, like, well, maybe they're just benevolent and we can't handle, and I reject that, because
Oh, you mean so they're withholding whoever they are? They're not telling us all of it because we need to be protected from the truth.
protected, and
Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
bullshit.
agree. And sorry, I have a filthy mouth. I didn't know what the rating on this podcast is.
I have no idea yet. It's
Great.
probably, well, I don't know.
Well, my goal is to get you kicked off YouTube before we
Okay.
get started.
All right.
I'm
Thank you
just-
so much.
I think that you have to assume these are not benevolent forces.
Yeah.
Because we're not children. We don't deserve to be lied to. All I want is the truth. I can handle it, whatever it is. So therefore, the truth might be really promising. Might be we have access to the divine. It might be, we can communicate.
Wait, we have access to the what you cut out there.
The divine. And again, I'm just hypothesizing, right? So maybe we are just bundles of love that can communicate telepathically and elevate to a higher consciousness together.
Right. And so let's assume we are, right? Under all this, whatever we have on ourselves. I think the easy motivation for people wanting to keep us from knowing that truth about ourselves is somebody wants to have a lot of something, whether it's goods, services, money, control. It's a manipulation of the natural order. I mean, I'd kind of like to believe that there is some kind of divinity circulating around, and but I don't know. I mean, I used to really think that behind the curtain there was some benevolent God who had everyone's back and it was going to be fine. And I never thought too much about it. I took it for granted. And once all this stuff happened with COVID and I started to have my eyes open, everything was in question. Like, what really is behind the curtain? So, to your point, I sure don't know.
Yeah. Have you heard that we may just be in the season of Satan?
I have now.
And I don't know. Look, I grew up Jewish, not particularly religious.
Yeah, you guys don't really do the Satan thing.
I never thought about Satan, and now I talk about Satan all day. In fact, I'm
all day,
every day, and I explore the difference between, and this is a recurring theme with a friend and I, of Satan or the devil versus Lucifer, right? Which
right.
is, and I do think about this in terms of the world we live in on the public stage, what I believe is a public stage, right? In that, oftentimes you've got these let's call it the freedom movement, and there are some, I think, actors that maybe don't have our best interests in mind, and
who are in the movement.
And prominent in the movement. And my interest is less in the particular characters and their names, because that's not my thing. But like, I do think there are components of this that are taking us down a path that looks like freedom, but maybe isn't actual freedom. And I've written a couple of pieces in the last couple of weeks. One was called Welcome to PSYOP Season, where I sort of make fun of both sides. It's kind of what you were saying earlier, and I explicitly, was the day after that No Kings protest. The same people who are challenging the deportations don't know that Obama deported way more people. Like, there's no knowledge of the facts. But then the other people,
right? It's just the optics, right? Because Trump is waving his hand about it, and Obama's smooth talking you into it. They also don't realize that Obama paved the way for the government to propagandize their own citizens. I mean,
Smith-Munted. They've all been Smith-Munted.
Yeah, I mean, and so there's so many, and I don't know so many things too, but it's. Anyway, you were talking about the No Kings.
But I think your last point is the point. None of us know anything.
Well, really. Because you can't. I mean, you have to live in your family. You have to raise your children. I mean, this is why we're all so easily duped, because who has the time? And also, do you want to have your whole life robbed by these people. And again, this is part of the reason I wanted to talk to people on this podcast, people who know things and then say, well, okay, so we suspect or know all this stuff. How do we live? Right? How do you not give your entirety of your life over to these people who hate you and who don't care about you at all and want to extract something from you?
Well, if you wanted people who know stuff, I don't know why you invited me.
Well,
So,
because you said you'd come on, and I'm trying to build a little street cred.
I think there is, Mark likes to say, and I've quoted him on this many times, observe but don't absorb.
Right. And I've absorbed that, and I think it's great.
So pay attention to the world around you. Look through it with a very cynical lens. Know that you're probably being manipulated in some way. And by the way, just for parity, on the PSYOP season or the No King stuff, the other side of that is you've now got a bunch of people who are, let's say, in support of the current administration, who have been kicking and screaming not to trust government for the last 4 years, are now screaming for more surveillance for deportations and
right.
machine. So sorry, I can't get on board with either of these teams. My team is my family, my community, and humanity. And
no, I agreed completely. I mean, I think that's one of the things that has been so disillusioning for me is that when we were all dissidents against, the one bad thing, the lockdowns, the mandates, the other side, it was so easy to have like the true north and to say, we're absolute free speech people because people were getting censored. Like you couldn't even say the word vaccine. I don't. Pardon me?
You just whispered it.
Oh, I did whisper it. Vaccine. But you couldn't say it. People had to use euphemisms for it. And then there are people that say, well, then Musk bought Twitter to advance free speech. I don't believe that. I think, it's just a giant data collection machine and we're all, we're all getting led somewhere. But after that, you could say it. But anyway, the point is that then things changed and Trump got elected and then our team got in the HHS. And then you see people not quite as ideologically consistent as they used to be. And I think it's a very tricky thing because you want to support the people that are in positions to maybe do some good. Because, I personally don't think that it's all a lost cause. I think that, like, for instance, I think some parts of government do matter. I think mostly it's propaganda and lies and people just trying to get reelected, et cetera, et cetera. But like in the pandemic, there were some people who made a difference for the lives of the people who lived in their states. So for instance, if you lived in Florida, you had a better quality of life than if you lived in Minnesota during the lockdowns. So I think it's worth supporting people who are in positions of policymaking to advance policies that are good. The tricky part for me personally is where do you draw that line? You want to stay true to your north of morality and first principles. And I think it all comes down to what you and I have talked about several times is that, nobody's coming to save us. But you also don't want to throw something under the bus that could potentially turn into, frankly, the best thing we're going to get, right?
Yeah,
it's tricky. I don't really know where I land on this.
I said a bunch, and I do wonder whether some of the so-called heroes, I do wonder whether they're long cons or not.
That's the question, right? How long is the con and who's on the Trojan horse,
Well, we know if you just go back and look at, say, the last 100 years of recorded history, there's a body of work that you can now say, okay, there's cause, there's effect, and you don't necessarily know someone's intentions, but it does seem as if whatever this force is that is in charge has a very long time preference. So they do set us up over the long haul. There are a lot of familial connections through this even. So when you start looking at it through that lens, it does start to beg questions. And then the other side of it is like, or some of these honeypots, like say you mentioned Florida, right? I could consider it at one time moving to Florida or Texas, right? When New York
Right. You and everybody else.
Then I started looking at, those are the two states where the Bill Gates mosquitoes were being tested.
Oh, gosh.
Like, oh God, are these just honeypots? Are they trying to lure the freedom-minded people to
Get bitten by these terrible mosquitoes.
get bit by the mosquito? So again, I think to your point from earlier, like you can drive yourself crazy with this. At this point, like I'm continuing to explore some of these spaces because I think they're really interesting. But I'm also at the same time trying to walk barefoot in the grass and and go outside and have sunshine and be around friends and family. So I think it's like enough that you realize that the world that we see on these death screens are completely artificial, although they can also form connection, like it's technology is right. It can be good and bad. But know that there's a good chance you're being manipulated.
Yeah, and it's so much of the activity, especially like on a platform like X, unless you know the person personally, you don't know if it's a bot.
It's great. I think a lot of what we see on, remember, this is my business for like 25 years. I think there's the whole dead internet theory. That a lot of what you see on the internet is now just AI. That's probably a show unto itself. Like
when you say dead internet, there aren't any living people behind it. They're all bots. Is that what you mean by that?
It's not my theory. That's a thing that exists. That a lot of what we see on the internet is just propagated, and it's that there's a force that initially was driving that. But a lot of what we see on the internet is just, total nonsense. And whether that's in social media or actual websites as well. Have you not heard this one?
What, the tapping of keys?
No, I'm looking up the dead internet theory of what.
No, I don't. I don't know anything about it. I mean, I'm boomer adjacent. Keep that in mind.
The dead internet theory is a conspiracy theory that proposes a chilling idea. The internet, particularly social media platforms, is no longer predominantly used and populated by humans, but is largely filled with bots and automated content. So certainly that exists on the social media platforms.
Sure.
It may exist on websites. I know people that were artificially creating websites, not to socially engineer, but for monetization in like 2004. So, fast forward a couple of decades, I imagine the tech's probably gotten better. So yeah, I think there's a part of it. But again, these are all lenses that we need to put on and consider as we have our own information diets and we find out things and just ask more questions, but also don't forget to not let it totally overcome your personality. Go outside, connect with nature, exude love and not fear, that kind of stuff.
Well, so, and I agree with all of those things. My question is it worth is it worth being an advocate? Is it worth doing any kind of advocacy? For instance, like during the pandemic, I advocated strongly to remove college mandates for vaccines from the student population. And I think that was worthwhile work. Now, was our coalition the result of those being pulled back, or would they have happened anyway? Who knows? I don't know. But in this environment, is it worth, and I'm not saying it isn't, but I don't know, like what is worth putting your time and treasure toward trying to use the apparatus we have to advance something, or do you just abandon that entirely and just act locally in your own sphere? Or is it a combination of both?
Or is it not a one size fits all and it's really up to the individuals and what their goals and passions are?
Yeah.
Right. So I so greatly admire and appreciate the advocacy you did around vaccine mandates. And I do think it made a big difference. I followed it at the time before I even knew you. And it did make a difference. And if you didn't stand up and people along with you, no one was talking about this. Right. So
well, I think it is important to speak out because you give other people cover, and that's where things start. If you don't, if you're so afraid, and you write about this in, what is your piece on cowardice or?
The coward's bargain.
The coward's bargain, in that, people don't speak up, and then we're modeling that for our children. And, like people would say like, oh, you could afford to speak up because, you had money or you didn't have to worry about, losing your job. But that's like a false choice, and once you do speak up about something, I do find that other people will say, oh gosh, I felt the same way. And so I do think that's very important. I think it just, for me now, I find it very disillusioning to, during the pandemic, it didn't occur to me that there were lots of bad actors around, or there was a long con going on like, quote, our team, and now it's just, I feel like the success of the mind control or the propaganda is so great that we're forced to question everything, which is
Yep.
good in of itself, but it's hard to commit to something because you're always afraid, like, maybe you're getting played.
Well, this is probably a show unto itself, but this is the thing with like the Fabian Society, where they'll infiltrate movements on the inside and have slow iterative change over the long haul that essentially drive society into, communism, for lack of a
Right.
better word.
Right.
And I think
And those people always have they have a long view. They
Yeah.
play the long game. I mean, look at our universities.
Yep.
That was done
That's-
over decades and decades, and it was small and
Yep.
little, and then all of a sudden.
Although if you look at the root of them, I recently read, I think is it Columbia? It was like it was like royal. It's the crown school, right? So most of the roots go back to, the same people and the same
Sure.
groups. We could debate what the hierarchy looks like on that, or whether at the top, whether they're even human, which is a whole longer conversation. But I think ultimately, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And to your question,
Agreed.
advocacy, again, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I've sort of come full circle. I was uninterested in the system, just call it before my wake up or whatever. During COVID. I almost tethered my whole identity to, the vaccine mandates, and then against central bank digital currency, which I think is like I don't think it's hyperbolic to say is a death knell to humanity, because it puts us in a digital prison forever.
It is not hyperbolic.
And then you keep pulling back layers, and I'm like, oh, actually, they're not just putting us in technical prison. They're actually trying to fuse us with technology and make us something post-human. And now I'm sort of at the point where I don't think change can happen from inside this system, because it's rotten to the core. That's not to say I don't admire, whether it's the work you've done, or even,
No,
people, whatever people in the
or there are people who are actually inside of the system now, who may have very, very good intentions, but who are bogged down by forces that are really strong, and they can't be overcome. I mean, like, people thought that these guys were going to waltz into DC and all of a sudden they were going to reverse all this stuff and throw it out the window. Well, they would be thrown out the window with it.
Well, there's a question of who is in power still. And,
Right.
who you ask. I'll ask my MAGA friend who Trump's playing 9D chess, and he's been in charge.
Oh, it's 9D now.
9D. It's cubes on cubes. And trust the plan. You've got lots of different views of reality, which I think is the point and the thing that's most interesting to me. But again, I am more interested at this stage, for my personal taste, in paying attention to it, but trying to act more locally. Yes, I'm doing a lot more writing, which was, as you well know, the pieces I've been writing are just things I was ranting on private message boards or in person over drinks. And I'm almost out of stuff to say. I think I've gotten most of it off.
I don't believe that, but
I'm currently doing a piece about the current mayoral candidate in New York, which I think is like a case study in, I don't know if you've been paying attention to this.
Oh, I sure have.
So I think it's a case study in some of these identity politics that are purely distraction, with policies that are so just, whether they're intentionally nefarious or good natured, are clearly going to end in misery for anyone who participates. But people just latch on to whatever the issue is. And the only thing I've heard from most of my friends, either pro or against this guy, to your earlier point, is his perspective on what's going on in Gaza. And as far as I know, New York's pretty far away from Gaza.
Right.
And I find that to be fascinating on its own. It's like, who gives a shit what the mayor of New York thinks of the conflict in the Middle East? What is he going to do about the economy and housing and safety on the streets and all the things actual working New Yorkers care about? So it's all utterly fascinating, but it's kind of the same trick. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they, and again, I'll use they in the broadest possible sense.
Mm-hmm.
They're good at like 5 things, and they keep doing those 5 things, and they're such good tricks. They just
Well,
keep doing it over
and
and over.
people never like they never get onto it. It's like watching the same card trick over and over again and thinking it's different because they changed out the deck and the cover of the card is a different color.
I knew the morning of 10/7. The first, I rolled over and my wife was like, "Oh my God, there was an attack," and genuinely horrified by the story.
Sure.
And
Because it is horrifying. I mean, just even if something's a false flag, people get murdered. It's a terrible thing.
you think that was a false flag?
I'm not weighing in on anything. All I'm saying is that even if it's like that's what people think. Well, even if it's a staged thing, or even if somebody let them through the defense system. I mean, there were so many
Yes.
questions, but real people get hurt. It's the same thing with that Butler PA thing. I mean, it seems to me that innocent bystanders were actually murdered.
Always. And
like
but if
9/11, whatever you think about who did it, how it was done, what it was used for, 5,000 people, give or take, got murdered that day.
we could throw in
Murdered.
all the
Yeah.
wars and Maui fires and all the things, right?
All of the things.
The point I was going to make though about 10/7 was my first reaction was what's going to happen to the medical freedom community, of which I was a part of. And I was
Yeah.
on one particular message board, which was a bunch of kind of dissident New Yorkers that over the 3 years prior had all become dear, dear friends. Like most, and I'm very lucky that my friends and family are intact. Many of these people did not have that experience.
Oh,
And
I
really,
understand that firsthand.
right, they weren't vaccinated, so their mother doesn't talk to them, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people became dearest friends of one another, and it was lovely. It was so lovely. It was like a strange bedfellow kind of thing across
Mm-hmm.
party lines, across ethnic lines. By
Yeah.
that night, by 10/7, by the evening, people reverted to their priors. A few quit the board. They're like, "Oh yeah, I hate you now."
Yeah.
I stand with and insert your flag, and it was fascinating, if only because one of the common themes on this particular board was making fun of how the power structure manipulates us. So it was almost like everyone had forgotten the 3 years we've all spent talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
and literally citing like CNN as the source. So
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what may or may not happen, because I don't know, it seemed completely preposterous and completely hypocritical. And I've subsequently seen a lot of fracture in that community.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So
it's the perfect issue because it cuts right through so many things, because people form their opinions about this particular topic early and deeply. And I think if you want to talk about programming,
yep.
And I've seen people who are otherwise really objective thinkers become completely triggered by this issue, and that's it. There's no discussing it. There's no not insulting people. It's we've been on boards together where people have to say, we can't talk about this topic. Don't even bring it up. And so we have to self-censor. I mean, I don't talk about the topic because my feeling is I don't know what's happening there. I don't have a dog in that fight. I hate the killing. I hate the murder of innocent people and the deployment of millions and billions of dollars in the service of killing that is done in our name,
Yep.
that we fund.
Yep.
That's my position, right?
Mine too. And I have a lot to say on this, but I won't get into it right now. All I'll say for now is trauma is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-generational trauma is, I believe, the most powerful form of it. Like I know I'm a progeny of Holocaust survivors. I heard never again from the time I was in the crib and how Israel was.
And how could you not? I mean, it's part of your scaffolding. It's part of your operating system.
In theory, in actuality, I'm an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm anti-war in every construct.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm being manipulated everywhere I turn. And I'm far more interested in loving my neighbor and trying to understand, how I can facilitate ways to do good in the world than exude hate and fear to others across the world. So, nonetheless, I think the bigger point is, I think we all need to rise above it. Otherwise, they're going to keep slicing and dicing us until we
Yeah.
become atomized into a group of one,
Hmm.
sitting alone. Although I guess that's what the metaverse is for. So I'll
Right.
digitally clone myself, and I'll have lots of different avatars, and that'll be my new thing, and I don't have to know any real people.
Well, I think that's where a lot of people are already residing, the whole social media landscape. Sort of related, I run the Brownstone Supper Club here in Bloomington. Every month, people get together and they hear a speaker and they come together. And, we're a deeply blue town. It's a very political town. It's, during the pandemic, people who didn't go along felt very alienated. And so this is nice because people find each other. Well, anyway, a professor at IU was there, and he's a professor of AI and also talks about philosophy and Christianity. And he handed me his manuscript for his novel. And I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but basically it's in the future, and there's this thing called the Hive, which feels a lot to me like the Matrix or Twitter. And people who are advancing humanity and still having babies are these primitive villages who still like observe deep Catholicism, right? So you have to have some kind of religion to stay in the real world. The point is that if you get sucked into the hive, it ruins your life forever because you experience this virtual life. And then even if you're liberated from it and you get out before you die in that chair, it's real life is never good enough again. And I think I'm trying to decouple from all of it every day more and more. I mean, I walk with people, they can't not take a phone, they can't not take their watch because they have to be told how long they're walking and they don't want to miss a call or miss a text. And that happened relatively recently. I mean, 8 or 9 years ago, we weren't like that. And now we're like that.
I think the internet was, I think, the 1.0 in the sort of the great tethering to the network.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, right around the time of the OJ thing, just as an aside, the 2.0 were the smartphones, which was 2007 is when the original iPhone was launched. And I do think the third epoch is AI. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to suggest it is going to have as profound, if not more profound effects than the first two.
Oh, the AI.
Yeah.
Oh, I think so too.
I mean, we're already in a post-truth world.
Mm-hmm.
We're interconnected. We have no idea. We now have, and again, it's just a tool, right? So I do worry that maybe it's going to suck our soul. But I did, as you're talking about this guy's book, which also sounds fascinating, I wrote a thing a few months ago called The Technocratic Blueprint, which documents like 100 years plus of kind of the elite agenda and, what we're seeing now and all the things we're talking about. They didn't just show up overnight. I think there's a really hard idea for people to get their heads around.
Oh, that it didn't just show up with, quote, our new technology.
Didn't just show up
Yeah.
with technology. It wasn't because you're like Steve Jobs is a genius and brought this to the world. I'm just going to read you a quick quote. H.G. Wells in 1937. The world has a world brain to which ultimately all knowledge is to be addressed. And it has a nervous system of road, railway, and air communication, which is already beginning to bind mankind into a whole. So it kind of sounds like what your friend's book is about. But this was,
in the 30s.
Ago. Yeah. So, he then goes on and he talks about the open conspiracy. This must not just be an English movement or a Western movement. It must be a movement of intelligence throughout the world. And then he gets into in something called a fiction book called The Shape of Things to Come, talks about how a pandemic might facilitate something like global governance. So you start to look at these old texts, and this is just one example of many, but you start to look at these old texts from 100 years ago. And I know my own perspective, I was ranting and raving in 2021 to anyone who would listen. When I started realizing how much was being censored, that, Orwell and Huxley weren't supposed to be playbooks to, that by 2023, I was like, oh, actually.
Yeah. And they were all part of it. They were all part of it.
And it was more about normalization than it was warning. But again, at this stage, it's like, all right, what the hell are we all going to do about it? And I think this podcast hopefully is a good means to that end, at least
thank you.
Making people ask questions. And
Yeah, I mean, that's really my central question because I'm not somebody who's an expert on any topic. I'm not interested in holding forth as an expert or actually, saying I know anything because I find it impossible to really know something beyond very small things like how to make the best brandied cherries, which I'm going to do later today.
very important.
Very important. But I'm just interested in continuing to talk about these topics, like, the things that you're interested in. I talked to Monica Perez the other day, and just to continue addressing the question of, in this rapidly changing landscape, swirling with lies and nefarious forces that want to decouple us from our humanity, from each other, how do you live well? And
Yeah, Monica Perez, I will say, is one of the few people in the world I know that just totally gets it.
oh,
She's
she nails it. She's
smart,
great.
seems so, I don't know her very well, but seems so cool and just totally gets it. She understands all of the manipulation and seems to be living a good life
She
in
is.
despite it all, or in light of it. So
Right. Well, she's an embodiment of observe and not absorb, which I have absorbed from you, and I try to do that. Well, we're getting to the end of our time, and I feel like we didn't touch upon any depth of topics that I wanted to interview you about with all your writing.
I'm very shallow.
Pardon me? You're very
I,
shallow? Yeah, I don't think so. So where can people find your work if anyone's interested in reading your stuff or seeing you on social media? Where are you?
I'm on the social medias. I'm on Twitter, which I still
Hmm.
call Twitter, at JSTYLMAN, so J
Hmm.
Stylman. I'm on Instagram, mostly just to post stories,
Great
mostly for.
stories.
Thank you. I don't have much of a following. I'm shadow banned on all these services.
Hmm.
A friend told me they tried to follow me on Instagram and I got a warning that I'm a purveyor of misinformation.
Oh,
Are you sure you want to
congratulations.
follow this person? Thank you. I'll wear that.
Congratulations.
But mostly just stories, and mostly at. I know there are people who don't talk to me anymore, who I still consider friends, that I think I'm having a meltdown in public. So I get a kick out of that. And I'm just Stylman. My last name is my handle there, and then I've been publishing a lot on Substack. It's just my last name, Stylman, STYLMAN.substack.com.
And I'll put those things all in the show notes.
Thank you,
Thank.
Joan. This is wonderful. Congrats on your new podcast.
Well, we'll see. I'm hoping it will be something that's sustainable. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Right back at you. I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Okay. I'll see you later.
Take care.
Bye.